Hello and welcome back to the Nutrition and Life podcast. My name is Lisa, I'm your host, and today I have the absolute pleasure of speaking with health and fitness coach Savannah Peters. Welcome to the show, Savannah.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. Great to finally meet you.
Yes, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about you, your coaching philosophy. We're going to talk all things strength training, etc. But first of all, I would just like to hear who you are and how you got to where you are today in terms of being a coach and your own training as well.
Well, I knew from a very young age that I have always been highly admirable of women that are look physically strong. And the nice thing is that typically a lot of mental strength comes from that too. You don't have to be just physically strong to be mentally strong, but I've always gravitated towards women that have that appearance. And when I was born, I was a triplet, and so I've always been extremely small. I was 3 pounds, 5 ounces. And so it always kind of made me feel a little bit on the insignificant side, didn't feel strong from that perspective. So I have always been in sports from when I was younger, typically running, because that was the biggest thing I was best at, the one thing I was best at. And then in what happened here?
I can still hear you fine. I
Hmm.
don't know.
My computer just like completely took me off that screen.
Oh.
But I was like, what happened here? I didn't touch anything. But I've always been in sports and running. And I really enjoyed that. I mean, I was good at it. It was great, but it wasn't anything that kind of felt like it was empowering me or just made me feel good about myself. So I started weightlifting in high school. They had one of those classes, and there was a coach named Coach Kane. He's now passed away, sadly, but he saw this little like 90, 95 pound freshman that just loved going to weightlifting classes because it actually made me feel good. It made me like feel like I was actually challenging myself because running just kind of came a little bit natural. Um, and I credit a lot of it to him because I had every single PE class from there on out was weightlifting every single semester. And it was something that has always stuck with me. It was something that made me feel like myself and made me feel empowered. And I didn't go into the fitness space right off the bat, though I did pursue my own health and fitness goals of just being able to, gain more strength and mainly muscle tissue because I'm a little bit, I would say on the leg side, I look like a flamingo. So that's always been something I've been working on. But needless to say, after being in the retail space, I wanted to go into the fitness industry. That was 5, 6 years ago. And it's been extremely fulfilling. I've been very lucky to amass a following, which I never anticipated. And I've done my research. I went into educating myself through precision nutrition and then now in one coaching, and then have been blessed to be around small bodybuilding community. Even though I never competed, it was cool to kind of see that little golden nugget that I was in and be coached by some amazing people. You had Alex Bush on your podcast, who is phenomenal, and be coached by Alan Kress. And I just have learned so much from them. And I feel like it's a really important thing to, immerse yourself in it. And so I've been given a lot of great opportunities.
Well, that's such a wonderful point in the sense of us coaches also benefiting so much from having coaches ourselves and just continuing to grow. As they always say, when you feel like you or you think you know everything, you've already lost. So yeah, that's the worst attitude to have. And I think with every coach, we can learn something, whether it's a bad coach or a good coach, like all the ones that you had, but and we can always take something away from that. And I just love the work that you're doing in the space in general. And before we started recording, we were talking a little bit about what it's like to be a 90s kid. And yeah, I do want to get into that in the sense of how beneficial or what kind of movements we're seeing in terms of women benefiting from all more strength training and just the turn this whole health and fitness space has been taking over the last few years, specifically for women of our generation.
Yeah, I mean, and the first thing on that, it kind of makes me think about like our mothers, our aunts, maybe some of our cousins that are, much older than us. And my mom has always been a little bit perplexed because she was born in the 60s. And, she did, when she was our age, it was the, 80s and the 90s. And I feel like with her generation, she was always kind of perplexed as like, Savannah, like, why are you continuing to weight train into your 20s after school. Like it's not a class that you have to do anymore. And I was like, that is so interesting why my mom asked that. She's like, and I asked her that, I was like, why do you ask that? That's such a foreign question to me. And she said, well, where I came from, granted, she grew up in a town of like 1,000 people in small southwestern Kansas. But needless to say, she just kind of went on and said, well, you really should. I never thought of, and people around me thought of, you really aren't training for anything or running more or less, or even weightlifting was the extreme, unless you're going into the NFL or you're going into the MLB or anything like that. And that was what was stuck in her head. And it made me feel kind of pertaining to like the 90s kids, the 90s women, of how it made me feel very fortunate for the generation that we grew up in, that while there were still negatives that we saw, a really cool thing is that we've been able to kind of see as time has gone on is that even going into our 20s and our 30s, we've still been empowered by a lot of the information that's came out, even though there's still bad and there's confusion, but there's good stuff. When you find really good people like you and everybody that you know and you've worked with and everybody that I know and I've worked with, there are good people that are trying to put out good information there. And I feel like because we're at our age, we're extremely fortunate to be able to have that access more than our parents did. So that's something that I feel like being born in the 90s that we're very fortunate with.
Yeah, absolutely. And sort of having shed that whole stigma of women don't belong into the weights room, or we just need to do cardio or maybe Pilates or yoga. I don't know if you have also babbled in like things like CrossFit or powerlifting or anything like that. I have a little bit of a CrossFit background, and so that is what got me to start with strength training. I always thought like, no, why would you want to do the weight room? Like when I was part of track and field team, we kind of had to go a little bit into the weights room, but more for, yeah, being explosive and those sorts of
Yeah.
things, not with the purpose of putting on muscle. And so I'm so grateful to CrossFit for introducing me to lifting just for the fun of it, also for like how good it can actually feel to pick up a heavy weight and be like, yeah, I just deadlifted, I don't know, 200 whatever pounds. That is freaking awesome. And I think that that is part of your philosophy also, right?
Yeah, most definitely. My background is, I mean, just as a whole, have always, I've never had a bone in my body that said don't go towards weightlifting. I granted like my mom, regardless of what she was taught when she was younger or just her own bias from, growing up and thinking about what is fitness. Um, I've never been had a negative influence in people saying, oh, like you should stay skinny or anything like that. So I think I've been very lucky in that realm. And with weightlifting, it's something that I've always been gravitated towards because it's like I've always liked muscle. I mean, people that I've dated, I've liked muscular men. So like, why would it be opposite for like women? Because I admire a lot of women. Dana Lynn Bailey and I think it was Ashley Horner were like the first like muscular women that I saw. And it was just this light bulb in my head. It was like, oh my God, I want to like be my own version of that. I did do CrossFit for a summer. It was the summer after high school and moving to a new city, trying out college because that didn't pan out for me. But I remember trying it that summer, and granted, it was a ton of fun. It was very much a community-based thing, which I didn't need a community to pursue fitness. It was just something new and fun that I've never tried. And CrossFit, wow, it has its good benefits. I will say it did kind of do a number on my wrists in my back because I didn't properly have a super solid and knowledgeable foundation at that point. It was more so because I enjoyed it and I loved weightlifting and I stayed in the weightlifting room. But, you got to learn more as you're being in the weightlifting room. You got to sharpen your tools and you have to recognize that you always can't do the same thing. And I quickly recognized that CrossFit, while any means of activity is great and exercise is a great, it banged up my body. My body is too small and at least my wrist really took a toll.
Yeah, I mean, I can only 100% underline that from my personal perspective as well. I just took it too competitively. I didn't have the the ego to just say like, no, today is not my day. I'm gonna pull back a little bit because
Yeah.
I didn't sleep so well. And yeah, my neck and my lower back, they also took a toll. So now it's just regular strength training for me, and which I still absolutely love. But I would love to hear about your approach to strength training because you have your own training program or method, which you call the Power Path method, and I'd love to hear a little bit about it.
Well, I only hope to, and kind of like a main thing with the Power Path method is to show people what they're capable of and that they really can do the hard things. And so it's not this one set plan that you have to stick with. It has to adapt to your life. I don't know if I'll ever have children. It's something that I've not necessarily made a decision on, but a lot of my clients are moms. A lot of my clients have crazy jobs that put them under a lot of stress. And so, what I really hope to do with my coaching and my philosophy with fitness is that, hey, I can give you the baseline to reach what your goals are. But when you're going to need time and you're going to have to realize that you're going to have to start from what is most optimal for you. I'm not going to make programs or any kind of training frequency or anything like that that's going to be unrealistic. So being able to, take that little bit of a hard pill to swallow, take it, and then be able to realize that you are going to be much better off adapting to what your situation is right now and then building off of that because you can always build off of it. So something that's realistic and achievable for people.
A very, very good starting point. I think most people just think, I'm going to start today. Give me that 5 or 6 day program.
Six
And
days a week.
yeah, they're
I
able
can
to
barely do
put that.
5, dude. Barely do 5. 4 is my sweet spot.
Exactly. And we think, yes, 6 days is, you can stick with that right off the bat, or even your body adapting to that. Because I mean, it takes some time. Why wouldn't you just start with the minimal effective dose? So love that baseline. And then in general, I assume it depends on whether you give someone a full body split or a push pull or upper lower. Do you tailor it completely to the individual, or do you have like set programs? That people can select from.
So the clients, whenever I go into kind of like their consult call, like I really try to do, and my calls usually with clients are about 45 minutes to an hour. My fiance keeps telling me, hey, you got to cut that short. And I'm just like, no, like I need the information. You don't realize it. I need the information to be able to be able to properly let them know what our plan is and make sure that I'm not leaving any stone unturned. And that's something that as you being in the fitness industry for a while too, that like you've just refined over time and you're like, God, I missed out on so much whenever I first started, but that's just how you have to start. It hurts a little bit looking back on that. But with that, with like training programs, I ask them what have they been doing as of recently, and then just I like a little bit of information from their history. So I tell them, I was like, kind of tell me about like your health and your fitness, how you've been working out and how you've been eating, whether there's been challenges or if you've been doing good with eating, from when you started up until now. And I just try to tell them, just give me as like concise as possible so that I can get an understanding of what you've done and what you haven't done so that I can figure out what's going to be the best mode. Because as you know, there's so many different forms of stimulus of training that are appropriate for an individual at a certain time and certainly aren't. So like if somebody's overeating, I'm not going to put them on something like metabolic local lactic work, that's just going to like wring them out so hard and not be really good for them because they're just frankly not eating enough. And I get a good mix between clients that eat enough and don't eat enough. And yeah, that's typically how I approach training is I have to hear it from the individual.
I think that's so great that you're really trying to individualize things and just getting a gauge for where they're at right now, and so you can help them best from their starting point. Do you also get a lot of people still coming to you with the notion of, oh, I don't want to get too big from lifting weights, or just in general being afraid of the weights?
That's really an interesting question. I don't really feel like I get a lot of clients that say I don't really want to get big and bulky. And I think partially because a lot of my clients are my age, slightly older, and slightly younger. I get a lot of clients that are just like, I just want healthy habits. I want to be strong. Of course, I want the physical benefits. I think, for anybody that's just like, I don't care how I look, that's okay. I've never heard that. But just as a whole, like I've never word for word had a client, at least from what I can remember, say, I don't want to get too bulky. If anything, they're afraid of, things not working out. And I think that comes from a mental standpoint. Like as a coach, you have to tell them life's not always going to be perfect. And if you're not good at something right now, what you need to do is recognize that it's like a skill that you have to develop. But most of all is they're afraid of failing. And so I just try to tell them one of my like favorite sayings that I learned probably about 3 years ago is you have to allow yourself to be an eternal learner. Just like you're learning throughout life, you're going to have to learn when you're working with me in order for yourself to get to where you want to be. And I'm reading a book right now by Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, which I think you know who that is. I'm excited to get into it. And she had a really good point of, you have to prepare to fail. But I don't feel like that clicks very well for a lot of people. They're like, oh my God, I have to like prepare to fail because at least for my mom, she was so afraid to try something different that made sense. Kind of like, as health coaches, we try to we repeat the same thing and it just goes out in one ear and out the other. That my mom was so afraid of failing that she wouldn't even try. She's one of those people. She tried Nutrisystem, failed. Everything else. And I don't know if preparing to fail is kind of like the right word salad that you could say. I think it's more so you have to adapt. Like adapting has a little bit more of a positive connotation to it because you're still moving forward, but you're just slightly shifting gears on what you're doing.
That is so interesting. And I think it links really nicely to one thing that I heard from Dr. Gabrielle Lyon on a podcast. And she was saying, or she was being asked what she would think is one of the main reasons why people, quote unquote, fail with health and fitness. And she said, not feeling worthy. And I think, I mean, you said like basically your mom was planning to, or she self-sabotaged simply by not
Yeah.
trying it and so on. And I mean, that could be linked with without like insinuating anything, but for so many women that I have worked with or people in general, that self-sabotage does somehow link back to not feeling worthy. And it's sad, but a great realization once it does the click for that person also.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such a sad thing to hear when people don't think that they're worthy enough, but it's because like, I have this client, he's actually a dad and he's put so much into himself and what he thought was his marriage. And he's an amazing human being, but he never put that belief in that worth in himself. And, it just a healthy assumption that could have possibly changed things for how his life went, and he's doing great now. But it never kind of hit me whenever somebody says that I just don't feel worthy because I think of my mom who's too afraid of failure. I think of my sisters who are, just trying different things in life to kind of have life, go in a better path. And that self-worth is just so incredibly important. I feel like I used to be very vain when I was younger, and that's what got me to where I am. That's what made me work out because I worked out on my vanity and stuff, and I've changed my perspective to where it's like so much more important for you to start with the self-worth, or even just like I tell my clients, you want to have a little bit of self-belief, and if you have that little bit of self-belief, just know that there has to be a little bit of effort that goes with it, and you're going to do it. Like you don't have to like fakely believe in yourself, because one thing I heard when I was growing up is like fake it till you make it, which I think can work in a lot of circumstances. It's still fine. It's a great saying. But like fake it till you make it never instilled any kind of worth and self-belief in me until I actually realized I just need a tiny bit of belief and I can put in the effort. But I've been missing that belief for a long time. So yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah, and a wonderful way of putting the fake it till you make it, because it can work, but if you never do the internal work parallel to come to sort of make up for that and eventually become that person, you're still not going to become that person. And one thing I wanted to touch on that you mentioned earlier, and that was the encouragement to your clients that weight training and everything else, it is a skill. You need to practice. You need to practice healthy habits. You need to practice eating well. It's not just something like from one day to the next, you got it, or it's like, oh, okay, I'm this person now. I don't mind not eating chocolate or whatever. I'm in control. But it's a
Oh, I still have chocolate nightly.
oh yeah, I did too. But exactly like practicing how to incorporate that in a good way. But yes, I love how you put that because I mean it really is a skill.
Yeah, and I think it also just helps kind of align that like if you're trying to develop a skill for like work or something, it's not always going to be fun. You're like, oh God, I got to get this done, but like I have to know it at the same time. So like, skill can be synonymous with still enjoying it, but a skill can also be synonymous with like it's something that you need to do. It's not emotionally driven like a goal, which I think goal is still a fine word. But like a skill is something that people are like, oh, I can develop skills, you know? They don't get super emotional about it. They're kind of like, hey, I can develop this skill and I can get through it. I'm going to grind my teeth and probably cuss a little bit, but I'll get through it.
I think the skill also insinuates that there's not an endpoint because no one's ever gonna be like you know, Kobe Bryant or whoever, like stop your practice. You have mastered your skill. All good. You don't need to continue with your three free throws. That's a hard word.
Yes.
But it was so when it comes to nutrition or so, sometimes people are like, oh, is it ever gonna feel like? Am I ever going to be there? Is this ever going to be? No, it is a life. Yes, it's going to get easier. You're going to get more proficient at it, and the times where you mess up are going to become fewer and fewer. But still, it is a lifelong, ongoing skill.
Yeah, that end point because I mean again like from the generation that our moms grew up in and maybe even like aunts too like I was talking about earlier like their generation is like the end goal is the weight. The end goal is you fitting in that bikini. The end goal is whatever it was like I don't know if you know about this but there was this drink called Slim Fast. And I remember having it as a kid because my mom had it and it tasted so good. So good, but like I think it was like Kellogg or Slim Fast if I remember. It's like the pinch test commercials. Um, and I was just like, these women want to lose that little bit of a pinch rather than, it's not saying rather because that implies that they know better. I think nowadays people know better with the information, that's circulating because they at least can pick up on little tidbits that kind of like are those aha moments. But like for, our mom's generation, it's just, that end point was just like, I want to fit into that bikini. I want to be able to fit into these jeans. It's like, well, why not get jeans that fit you great right now and be able to recognize that like you can always like go smaller in size, but maybe you might actually do really well in that size with a little bit more muscle and maybe just a little less fat, but focusing on building muscle while being able to see that your body will transform.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that change of body composition, it's so wonderful. I love those. I love those pictures where it's like, I don't know, whatever, 140 and 140, and it just looks
Yeah.
completely different. And you're like, wow, I would have never thought that. Yes.
Yeah.
But in general, I just love how it seems like you're approaching your coaching from a point of I'm educating my clients on something so that they understand, so that they want to comply with it long term and be consistent with it. I mean, education drives compliance. That's
Yeah.
one absolutely 100% a great philosophy, I think, to coach by. But yeah, how do you implement that like specifically? Let's say you have a new client, you have your intake calls with them. Do all of them do just training, or is it always training and nutrition, sometimes just nutrition? And how frequently do you have a touch point with them?
Yeah, good question. Loaded question. Let me know if I miss anything. But the way that I kind of like approach, their nutrition and their education, I actually get a good chunk of clients that, will take what little tidbits from social media there is and at least get a pretty good head start. If anything, that's always going to be good for someone if they can at least practice kind of like the minimum that you can learn from social media, the things that you see repeated on and on. But there's so much like nuance and context that's needed for someone. How high are their stress levels? Or, do they really feel like they're a person that truly challenges them physically because maybe they haven't been in a position in their life like early sports where you can easily establish that you can push yourself physically so much. I have a few clients and I'm like, look, you haven't had that physical activity when you were younger, and so this is going to feel foreign. It's going to feel uncomfortable, but this is that big thing that you need to work on like being able to physically be okay that you're going to be uncomfortable in your training sessions for that small, maybe 45 minutes, an hour. And then my hypertrophy clients, hour and a half, training sessions. But context and nuance is important. So I feel like with that, just kind of being able to help them recognize that, like telling them, hey, through what you've told me, through your experience, this is what I feel like is going to be that solid baseline to start off with. And that's just what we need to establish. Simple as possible. What is it? Low hanging fruit, right? And while some people are like, I know I can do more. And I was like, well, yeah, you've been trying to do more right now by training 6 days a week or training five and, not tracking your food and thinking that you're eating enough when you're probably not eating enough. So it was like, clearly doing more is not always going to be it. I was like, show me what you can do with doing something different and recognizing that there's just as much value in it. So I really try to establish that baseline, and I have varying levels of that baseline that I establish for them. And then I said, hey, there's going to be more that you can do down the line, but I need you to nail what we really need to focus on initially and then build off of that. And they're like, okay, well, like I can build off of it. And that kind of like boosts their esteem that if they reach this level, they're like, I want to go to level two and I want to go to level three. And then what else can I do? What else can I learn? And as we go through those levels, they're learning more and more because it's not something that they learn right off the bat. It's stuff that is best learned to them and more applicable to them in that moment rather than overloading them in the beginning of like, well, this is something you'll want to think about for, months down the line. We're not even talking about that. I'm kind of giving them that base plan of like, this is best. And then just recognize you're going to learn stuff that is going to click for you as we're working together. And then you're going to be like, oh my God, this came right at the right time that I needed to learn this.
I think that's such a, I don't know about you, but at least when I started off with coaching, and I hear that from many rookie coaches that we want to demonstrate how much we know
Give you
and how
everything.
much information we can give. So when a client signs up in the first week, you give them like 95% of what they could ever possibly need, and they're like, whoa, they might just skim that and take like 5% of that away. And then over the course of the next few weeks and months, keep asking questions that are in the guide, and you get frustrated because you're like, oh, I gave you all this information already. But of course, we can only take on so much. So I love what you're saying about taking it step by step and just like even holding people, well, not holding them back, but even like hold your horses type of thing. We don't want to start off too soon. And one thing that you're really big on, I believe, is consistency. And that's one of my favorite words out there because I truly believe um, that is what most people are missing. It's not
Yeah.
the exact macros. It is not the perfect training program. It is not even sleeping 20 minutes more or so, although that's awesome. But it is the being consistent with, even if it's just quote unquote just three times per week training, being reasonably good with your nutrition. It is exactly that.
Yeah. And I think one thing that my clients enjoy, and I don't know your check-in process with your clients, but my clients, they can text me any day and I try to get with them either the same day or the next day. But the biggest thing that I tell them is like, you're not only, and this is just in the amongst of like how we communicate. So I have just regular text messaging, voice memos with my clients, training and form videos, and then I do weekly check-ins. So like I tell them there's two forms you can communicate with me, and they're going to be best in certain situations. The communication daily, hey, I'm going out on a date and I need help looking at this menu. I'm thinking about X, Y, and Z and having this. Do you think there's anything else I should be aware of, adjustments? And I tell them, I was like, you need to, what do I say? I try to tell them is you need to advocate for yourself because not only are you paying for me for this, because I want you to get the most out of your money, I know I can give you the most out of your money for what you're paying for. I was like, but you have to recognize in those moments that like made you feel like it threw you off before. Like you have to be like, oh, let me just shoot that text message to Savannah. I don't even know if it's going to matter or not. I know the menu. I've been here before, kind of thing. This is at least how I think if I was a client, just a new client to me. But like you have to try something different. So like I have my clients, I was like, ask the stupid questions that you think are the stupid questions and they're really not. Like The reason why you've been spinning your wheels is because you've never really felt like you could just text that person of like, hey, what should I do in this? Or this is happening. What do I do here? Or, X, Y, and Z. Like, I want you to think in that path that it's like, oh, Savannah wants me to text her in those situations. Because most of my clients are like, I don't want to bother you. I'm okay with once a week, check-ins. And I'm like, no, I was like, that is 50% of what we do are those weekly check-ins. And with those weekly check-ins, I tell them, I was like, think of it, you'll like see me on your computer or a video once a week, kind of like this, how like I'm in the top corner of your screen and they get to see the check-in sheet that I use for them and Google Sheets and stuff like that. And I was like, you'll get to see me once a week, kind of talk about your week, ask some questions, give you some homework, ask you, how things are going, what do you need more help with? I was like, that's 50%. And they think it's only, just that 50% of check-ins of like, oh, that's what I really need to focus on. When in reality, it's those moments in real life where you're like, I don't know. Again, I think of myself if I was my own client, I'm just not a big eater. And I'm just like, oh, Savannah, like I really don't want to have my last meal. It's 8 o'clock. I'm going to go to bed around 10-ish or so. I just, I don't want to eat, but like, what should I eat? Like, text me. Yes, I might not be able to get back to you right then and there, but that's probably like a repeated habit that's going on with you that you just don't want to finish your last meal. So, like, instead of feeling like you have to have this last big meal or anything that's typically not what you, eat, or maybe you just skip that meal at night, that you just say, like, I would text them, I was like, don't think that you have to have this huge meal because I don't want to feel like it's this goal that like is so out of range for you to not be able to hit. And I was like, have like a snack. Like think of it as something like it's better to have a little bit of a snack, a little bit of food, than feeling like you're just trying to eat this monstrous meal.
Yeah, I love what you say about the check-in actually just being 50%. I think that that's really, really misunderstood or just many coaches probably don't communicate that either. I love it when people send me food pictures. They're like,
Yep.
oh, I went out to the restaurant, I ordered that, I logged it like this. Would you agree with that? Or what can I change? Or something like that. I love it. Or even on vacation when of
Oh,
course only if they feel like it, but if it's like yeah, I want to go out on date night and so on, and I think more than anything it shows us and also the client themselves that they're still keeping that awareness around what are my goals during that time. That's really what it comes down to. It's not even so much about a little tweak of you would have ordered the Thai chicken salad instead of the Mexican chicken salad or whatever. It does that doesn't actually matter, but it shows you that she's thinking about what should I order, what is instead of just oh, I'm going out on date night, whatever, I'm off track, I'm not logging this, I'm just ordering, whatever I feel like in that spur of the moment. So a really, really, really great point there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and the good point that you kind of brought up, it's like it doesn't matter if you get the Mexican salad or the chicken salad. It's just a matter of like, how can I make this to like better fit my goals? Because like we don't want our clients to just completely change what they're eating and feel like it's unattainable. That's why they came to us because they get the feeling that our, programs and how we work with them is like adaptable. And so I tell my clients, I was like, think about what like you usually eat when you go out to eat, and then like, what are the like not so awesome versions of it? Is it fried? Does it not have a protein source to it? Is it doused in a sauce? I was like, think about it. One, you want to usually try to avoid fried food, but I like my Chick-fil-A every so often, probably once a week, every 2 weeks or something. I'm not, perfect. I'm not this perfect unicorn that eats perfectly. So I wouldn't expect my clients to either. But like, what are those aspects of that meal that could make it better? And so, like, one, asking for the sauce on the side or to be cooked in like oil or to have some extra protein. I don't care if that protein is left over at the end of the night and maybe you have it the next day. Like, you still like made that choice that was slightly different than what you did before, rather than just being like, well, I'm helpless. I can't do anything in this meal. Like I am going out on this date and I really want to enjoy it. And I only enjoy it by just giving up on my goals. Like,
That's
no, like, that's
yes.
just going against like who you want to be. Who you want to be is going to feel foreign until you actually put some slight effort into it.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. I want to underline that for sure.
Yeah.
I also am
Highlight, underline, italicized.
exactly. I'm also super intrigued because to most people, it's going to be foreign to hear, oh, I don't want to eat my last meal. Most people are on the opposite end of the spectrum where they're like, oh, I wish I had more calories. So tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about your current training, your current training goals or physique goals, perhaps as well. And yeah, where you're at in your journey.
Oh God, yeah. It's a double-edged sword. I feel like the more aware I've gotten of how being in the industry and like how food really impacts your goals and just your overall health, it's made me more aware that like I am just not a food driven person. I had one uncle that was a hunter and had amazing food, and that was about the only time of the year, 2, 3 times a year, where I had like awesome food that I was like really, really excited for it because it was like gamey and he hunted it himself. But like, I love my mother. I mean, people on both on my dad's side and my mom's side, they were never like amazing cooks. Like I didn't come from an Italian background or like big food backgrounds from some of my friends. So I can't always relate that like food was like this amazing thing that was like, oh my God. My mom's side of the family farmed, and probably the one thing that I was the most excited about was the corn because they farmed corn. And I love corn. I just wish corn had more nutritional value. So, needless to say, like I had a great childhood. I had pretty healthy relationship with food, but it was never something that like emotionally driven me to where like food is this emotional thing. It's never connected for me for that. I can empathize with people that where they see food as like this comfort level. But for me, it was always even just like growing up, it was just, you need to have your pasta, you need to have your carbs if you want to do well on your 800 or your cross country race. And then I just recognized I was like, oh, I probably need to eat for weightlifting too. So like I'm gonna eat. So needless to say, my goals, I feel like even though I've been in probably less than a handful of like fat loss phases, um, it's always been to grow. I was 90 to 100 pounds in high school, so I've always had a small frame. Like I said, I was born a triplet. I was 3 pounds 5 ounces and see-through. I was just so small. So like I've had these tiny little flamingo legs as I've grown up, and I've just always loved women that have had these beautiful, muscular, dense, thick legs. Because I see that as strength. I see that as strong, and I love just strong individuals. It's just what I'm attracted to and what I admire. So I have been in a growth phase for probably the past month or so. I did take kind of the summer off, or more so, I would say it was the end of May, so June, July, and August, to enjoy myself, which I still had those baseline things in there for me, like making sure I'm at least eating and having 4 meals a day, at least focusing on protein and making sure that, I put those standards for myself, but I'm not putting it at the extreme that's like needed for a surplus because that's what I'm in. So I'm just recently increased my food. I was, in a very small surplus, but I slowly recognized that I need to increase my food with my training that I'm doing. And I've been just feel like I've on this ever like growth and path to like growing as big as I can. But the one thing that's getting in my way is just not being super food focused. I almost have recognized these points where I've been very successful with bulks and very successful with like the very few fat loss phases I've been in that like you have to almost kind of get into this mode and it's just like when somebody is like, in a caloric deficit, it's very much the same mindset. Like, I don't want to have this meal, or maybe like for me, it's like, I don't want to have this meal because I'm just not interested in eating again. Very big emphasis on just eating again. It seems like so soon. And kind of like the same aspect of like somebody being in a fat loss phase is like, I really want to have this meal instead of this meal. Like you always want that like thing that sounds a lot better. So my struggle has been like I've just always wanted to grow. Of course, I'd love to surpass 130 pounds. The closest I've gotten to that is 127. And it's always going to be this rhetoric for me that I'm getting more and more, I wouldn't say comfortable with, but comfortable with knowing that I'm going to have to push myself more than I have in my previous bulks. That it's like, you're going to have to try harder than last time. Because last time it got you there and it got you the results that it wanted you to. But your body is adapted to that. And so
Mhm.
you have to try even harder. So for my mind, it's really just food. I can go train. I train 4 days a week. I try to maximize my steps. If I'm feeling spicy, maybe I'll go on a run. But I did a lot of running in the summertime, and I just felt like at that moment something was speaking to me. I was like, you go ahead and train and stick to those like baselines and stuff. But I pulled back food so I could just be at a comfortable level, not even just like in my body comfortable level, but like when you're just feeling like you're force feeding yourself all the time, it just feels rough.
Mhm.
Like thinking
Eh,
about all these, clients that have been in habitual like dieting phases, like that exhaustion that you feel from like um being hungry all the time and feeling like you can't have what you want. It's the same feeling, but you're having to eat more than what you're comfortable with, way more comfortable with, and you just kind of feel stuffed, and you're just like food just gets to be tasting the same after the second bite, and it's not enjoyable. So that's my goal, and I'm very like grateful that I'm at a point to where like my goal is to grow. It's certainly like a privilege to be here rather than feeling like I have to kind of like rebuild my body, because I feel like I've been very fortunate that I just weightlifted for such a long time and never gravitated towards food, but I still ate. I've never had a eating disorder or anything, God bless. But there's always something that I have to work on, and it's eating more than I'm comfortable with at the point to complement my training and achieve my goals.
I love how you're just giving us a different perspective, or I think from most people. And I think to the listeners as well, while that might seem or sound like, oh, I can't relate to that. I
Oh,
wish just,
God, it must
yeah.
be nice.
But honestly, I can definitely appreciate the fact, the comparison that you're drawing, and also just if it's not as easy as, well, then just go and grab a extra large menu from whatever huge thing and shovel in 1,000 calories from crappy food. That's not what that is either.
You
Because
feel like crap, yeah.
or yeah, you're gonna feel like crap, and that's gonna store more as fat and not as body as muscle mass anyway. So that's not what we're wanting either. But I think it's so interesting how we then have to like how shift from the mindset of, okay, what foods are more easily digestible, what foods are more highly caloric, like let's say peanut butter, or whatever, like that you can put into a shake, or your oats or so, just to make it more calorically dense. So just shifting from
Yeah.
one to another. And I think it just highlights the importance of periodization, of knowing what you're doing at what time, instead of like having that thought in the back of your mind of like, oh, I can't have rice because rice is, whatever else, or I can't have the peanut butter because it adds up in calories so easily. So no, I love that you've given us a bit of a different perspective on things there. And I'm sure someone can empathize with that as well, and from experience as well. When there were I sometimes hear that when people go through a reverse diet, or when their metabolism
Yeah.
is so adapted that they don't have the hunger cues anymore. They're eating like 12, 13, 1,400 calories, and they're like, but I'm not hungry. And you're like, well,
You've
that's not.
gotten to that point.
Yeah, and we need to build on that, even though you don't actually want to. So
Yeah.
no, thank you for sharing that so openly and so vulnerably, and just in general for giving us a little bit of an insight into your coaching philosophy. I absolutely love it. I'm going to link everything in the show notes, from your training programs and website to your amazing Instagram, that people should absolutely go and check out. So thank you so much for your time, Savannah. Is there anything else that you want to finish off with, in the sense of, yeah, just a takeaway for the listener?
Oh God, hit me with the hardest question. One, I gotta thank you for having me on here. You've been great. And it's really nice to get to know you from your perspective, and super cool facts to learn about you too. And I think what you put out on your social media is just what everybody needs to hear. And hopefully it's not gonna go out the other ear. It's gonna be like, oh, this like kind of makes sense. Maybe I should like try this. So fingers crossed that's gonna continue to work for people on that. Um, but I think leaving anything memorable for someone is going to be that like it's what I've said before is like that little tiny belief. If you can just attain that and then just recognize that relentless effort, to varying degrees, there's going to be some days where it's going to feel like you're like pulling teeth, and you're just going to be like, this is the last thing that I want to do. But in that moment that you just kind of close your eyes, or maybe in my case, you do an eye roll and you don't want to do it, like that's the exact moment that you're just like, but what if I do try? It's really not going to be as bad as I think it is. So I think if people just recognize like one, any form of taking care of yourself and having that belief is going to benefit you, but you can always level up, you can always do better, but it doesn't seem as out of reach as you think it is. Like it's just that little bit of trying that might actually make that really big difference for you.
That's a wonderful takeaway. Thank you so much.
I tried hard.